Greetings, this is Ty Brown with AthleticDirectorU here at the 2022 NACDA convention here in Las Vegas on ground. Happy to be in person. I'm joined by Bryan Blair. Bryan is the Vice President and Director of Athletics at University of Toledo. Greetings, Bryan. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Ty.
Man, not even a year at the job, like really just starting in your first year.
Absolutely.
At Toledo. Congratulations on that position. I think that's an excellent thing. In the industry for roughly 15 years.
Yeah. Spent
some time. I mean, you've been all over. Compliance, Deputy COO, Washington State, Rice, worked for some elephants in a profession in terms of understanding philosophy, understanding leadership. And it's kind of why I want to have you here. Talk about leadership, but also talk about this prep leading up to becoming an athletics director, right? You've had a few interviews throughout the years in terms of trying to be an athletics director, and then Toledo was the place that fit for you and you fit for them type situation. But I wonder about the preparation of throughout the years, working your way up to deputy, working your way up to CEO, compliance, student athlete development. Tell me about the preparation that's needed, especially for somebody who's fresh in the chair, who has a perspective of working for a couple of elephants that have their own path in terms of getting it.
I mean, I think it starts with having great mentors and working for great people.
Right.
That's really important. And somewhat in my career, early on, I kind of fell into that. I was just looking for the job or the logo, and I worked for some really great people, and I saw how they stretched me, but also pushed my career forward, even if that meant leaving that institution. So that was really big. And again, I fell into it early on. Later in my career, I realized the importance of it. And so you fast forward, and then I start vocalizing to those people, I want to be an AD. I want to be a Division I AD, because I believe if you don't tell people what you want, they can't really help you reach that aspiration. So once I started vocalizing that and said, hey, what should I do? What should the preparation look like? What should the path look like? And my mentors along the way helped me and say, hey, you need this experience, you need this, or this will be the next step in your growth and platform. And then it was just trying to do a really good job at what I was doing and constantly saying yes to every single opportunity that came before me. If that was Pat coming to me and saying, hey, I want you on this committee, or I want you to lead this project, never saying no, never saying I don't have enough time. Even when a lot of times I didn't.
You're right.
A lot of times my wife was crushing me because she was like, we were supposed to go on vacation this week or whatever it may be. But always saying yes to those opportunities, because you never know what you might learn or who you might interact with. So then it got time to actually look at opportunities and look at AD jobs. And my mentor, Joe Cargard, once told me, he said, hey, draw a list of all the jobs that you think you would love to have. Then strike out those that have a sitting AD, strike out those in parts of the country that you may not want to live out, and then strike out those that you probably can't get from being, at the time, the senior associate AD at Rice.
Yeah.
That's the pool you've got left. And when you do that exercise, that number gets really, really small.
Yeah.
And you realize how hard these jobs are to get, and how prepared you have to be, because everybody in that pool has spent multiple years and multiple mock interview sessions and everything preparing for that moment.
Yeah.
So I've been fortunate to have some great mentors. Pat was really good about getting me prepared to, one, think like an AD, but then two, win the interview with what you say, how you express yourself, how you articulate your examples, and how you articulate that you have a plan, which I think is really, really important for those that haven't sat in the chair before, to be able to give a president confidence that you can be the guy or the girl leading that organization, and won't get them embarrassed or in trouble. They'll be proud of that hire.
What's interesting is there are times when you can do all those things and you come from a great coaching tree, for the lack of a better word, and maybe the position isn't right for you. You might feel like it is, but the school may not. They may decide to go with someone else. How do you not take that personal if you are trying to be an athletic director and know and believe you're doing the things right? I mean,
that may be the hardest part of this endeavor, right? Pat and I talk about it a lot, actually. How many times, and you talk to a lot of ADs, and I know there's some at this conference that presented and say, hey, I'm now a big time Power 5 AD, but I interviewed 12 times to get my first AD opportunity. And what you see is there was probably a lot of people that got that first no or that second no and gave up and decided, hey, I don't want to be an AD anymore. I want to switch industries. And I think some of it's survivor. I think you got to have some individuals that can take those opportunities that you fail, quote unquote, or you're not a fit. What do you learn from those, and how do you get better each time? And it's like just no different than it was for me in football or anything else. As you get knocked down, how do you get up and get better from being knocked down, and use that adversity as an opportunity to grow? And that's what I tried to do throughout the course of my career, but certainly in talks with AD opportunities. And really what I found out through this opportunity, the interview, the conversations around it just felt different. They were just different. There was others that you felt like you were forcing, or you maybe had to nuance the answer or be something maybe that you weren't. And then this opportunity, everything came natural, down to my wife's hometown, down to my strengths and what they were looking for. Everything aligned. When I talked about my love for strategic planning, that was music to my president's ears because he loved it.
Yeah,
that didn't match up with every president. Mm-hmm. When I presented a 90-day plan, he loved it because he loves to see plans. He loves to see it laid out. And so I think this opportunity was the perfect fit for me. And in hindsight, others would have been not nearly as good of a fit for me personally and professionally. Yeah. So I think things happen for a reason, but using each failure as an opportunity for growth has been key to me.
You know what I wonder, and it's probably hard to tell now, right? We're new to the chair, but has there been an experience as you've grown in your career that you felt like, you know, as I think back now that I am in the chair, that thing right there was probably one of the most important things that I could have ever done to get me here? Is there anything like that you can think of?
I think just going through hard situations and coming out on the other end.
Being resourceful in terms of.
Well, I mean, I think when you work at a Rice in the middle of Houston, Texas, in a really crowded market, and you got really high academic standards, sometimes it's challenging to recruit talented young people with those standards, and you learn how to do things maybe a little bit different way or think about them a different way. And then I go to Washington State, where we're a Power 5 program, but we're competing with people with bigger budgets than us. We have to think uniquely and more efficiently with our dollar, hire coaches that have a different kind of spin on it. I think all that made me better and ready for this job. And I think in terms of Washington State, I mean, it's no secret. We ran into some issues with our football program. And we're able to come out on the other side of that and win the Apple Cup and celebrate and go to a bowl game, and it ended up being a tremendous year. We got a great football coach there, Jake Dickert. I think going through that experience, being in that fire and coming out on the other side, it really gives you the confidence that, hey, I can lead this thing. I can go through that and come out on the other side. There's nothing I'm going to walk into at another institution, not be able to come out on the other side of it. And again, using that adversity as an opportunity for growth. And I don't think there's any more preparation you can do. You can't mock interview your way to that. You can't do capsules on your way to that. You can't watch seminars. Sometimes you just got to live it and go through a lot. Put yourself in adverse situations and then come out on the other side a better person.
Right, a better person, which is excellent. You think about culture, right? It's a word that, you know, is used all over the history of the world. You've hired people before, staff, coaches, and at some point, you know, you'll have to hire for Toledo. I wonder about culture. I wonder about bringing somebody in who may not be a part of the culture, but you want to bring this person in to fit into the culture. Tell me a little bit about experiencing that when you talk about staff or when you talk about coaches, because once you bring somebody into the culture is going to shift a little bit, right? Because now you have somebody new into it. So tell me a little bit about that aspect of it, because I guarantee you, being an athletic director, at some point you'll have to hire people for the staff there.
And I've already done it. We just announced our softball coach today. And going through that process, and Good to Great's one of my favorite books.
100%.
And I've adapted from that book my own philosophy on what it takes to move an organization forward. People first. Recruit, retain, develop the absolute best people you can get. Culture number 2, we before me, hard work. Then strategy, what you will do and what you won't do. And then add more resources to the pie. And so when you talk about culture, so much of that is dictated by who you bring into the organization.
Right.
And then what is the common thread amongst all those people on their behaviors, their expectations, their accountability, and how they behave within that organization. So we talk a lot about fit, and what that means to me is matching those core values to my own and what I want to see in that athletic department and moving forward. But nothing we do is more important than hiring people.
Yeah, 100%.
When I have that opportunity to hire somebody, anybody that's ever worked with me will tell you, from a strength coach to a head coach to an academic advisor, I literally try to drop everything and focus on that hire. And the one thing I learned from Pat is really leaning on your network and your resources to vet people. So I start with, what have you done? What on paper have you done? Can I see it? How have you impacted organizations? Number 2, what do people say about you? And I'm going to call everybody under the sun and more to try to figure out, what have you done? Who are you on a bad day when you have a flat tire? How do you treat people, from the janitor to the VP? And then lastly, and least importantly, is the interview. So I believe you can be anybody within an hour of meeting somebody. But
you meet their representative, right?
So that formula served me well. That's a combination of what I learned from Joe and what I learned from Pat. And I put it to use for myself. And I think I've been really successful with it in recruiting really talented people. And they can tell throughout the process how much work we put in to try to find the right fit, the right person. And they feel value throughout that process. So sometimes that allows you to get a talent you wouldn't otherwise get because they know you're their person, not just another person.
Yeah, which is important. he mentioned core values, and of course, as I interview people, you hear a lot about it, right? And you hear a lot about people saying, I want to make sure my core values match the institution core values, and we can line up, and then there was alignment. Going into interviewing for Toledo, you interviewing them interviewing you, understanding what was important to them in terms of core values as an institution, and in terms of core values as a athletics department, and then coming from yours, which you probably established years ago in terms of your core values. Tell me about that in terms of the research part, and then in terms of when it came to fruition, when you're sitting down talking about those aspects of the job and what you bring to the job and what they bring to you in terms of becoming a leader of the athletics department.
Well, I think a lot of it, when you look at these jobs, is can I be myself? Mm-hmm. And I think we talked a little bit about fit and some of the jobs that don't work out or do work out. You want to find a place that you can be you, authentic version of yourself, and say, I can bring my full self to the plate. And so I know my core values: family, passion, curiosity, integrity, servanthood, and I voice those a lot. And so when I'm in an interview setting, they say, hey, do you have any questions? For me to be able to say, hey, you know my core values because they're on my materials. Mm-hmm. How does this institution align with those core values? Right. And allow them not only say they do, but give me examples of how they do. So when I talk about family, I talk about my own family and how important that is to me. And you're going to see my kids running around the office. That's part of who I am. I'm a dad and I'm a husband, first before foremost before anything. But I also mean being a good teammate and treating each other as family within the athletic department. We work too hard to work with people you don't like or bad people. And so I want to hear that institution also values my kids running around the office. I want to hear that they treat each other like teammates. I want to hear that they do take care of each other and treat each other with respect. So not only saying, okay, what are your core values? What are mine on a piece of paper and matching them up. During the course of the interview, I've had to give them numerous examples of what I do and how I do it. I want to turn the table and ask how you do these things that align with my core values. And is that truly you? Or is this maybe not the right fit for me?
Yeah, which is an excellent conversation. You talk about walking in day one. And I guess the perception out there for us who have never been an athletics director is that day one is when you start. But I'm pretty sure there was probably some work you did before you showed up on day one. Tell us a little bit about the pre-work in terms of starting a job as an athletics director.
Yeah. And my situation was a little nuanced because I got announced in February, did a press conference in February, but technically my start date wasn't until May 2nd. Mike O'Brien retired at the end of April. And so there was a sizable gap on paper that people thought, well, you had one group of people that thought, well, that means Bryan's not doing anything for Toledo until May 2nd. He can stay at Washington State forever.
Right.
You had another group of people that said, well, I know that's your official start date, but I need you to get started on some things right now. And whether that be our basketball coaches extensions, whether that be a handful of other items that we need to get going, we needed to start the ball rolling. And so I sent a questionnaire out to the full staff, got responses on that questionnaire. So I was able to start learning more about the department and the people within it rather than waiting for May 2nd to go. It was doing interviews with the local media and getting on board with them. And even when you're off camera, off recorder, being able to have conversations with them and say, hey, tell me what your thoughts are of this opportunity. It was making some decisions on some staff and coach moves that need to be made and saying, hey, how is this going to shape the department? And early on, trying to sense of what my president wanted to be involved in, what he didn't want to be involved in, and how we made these decisions long term. But I think that I'd be naive to think that things weren't going to start till May 2nd. It was way before then. I think that questionnaire that I did was critical for me to get early insight on the department and learn more about it. But I think a lot of it was setting up Zoom meetings, setting up conversations, making phone calls, and starting to put together and nuance the plan that I prepared to attack once I hit the ground running. And so it was planning for that first staff meeting. It was planning for that first week on the job, that first meeting with your senior staff, what you want that to look like, your first time addressing all the head coaches at one time. These things that sometimes when you dream about being AD, maybe you hadn't thought through all those nuances.
Right.
And you put a lot of pressure on yourself to want to hit every one of those first impressions right. And so I think by having that time to really think about, okay, what do I want this to look like? What do I want my message to be? And how can I be consistent throughout all these conversations? I think using that time to think through what that is was really, really important to me.
Expectations, right? You may go into a job expecting that when I show up, this, and maybe this, based on your gauge of talking to the people in the department, the pre-work you've done, and talking to other athletic directors about what to expect when I first show up on the first day. Tell me about your expectations and the actuality of showing up on the first day.
Yeah. I think my expectations were people would be happy to see me. It'd be great. There'd be a lot of energy in the room. Yeah. I would talk just like I did before my press conference. And we would roll out and have a good day. I think a lot of that matched up What I didn't quite anticipate is maybe some of the emotions of the staff that had a leader that had been there 20 years that is now retired, and you got a new face in the room, a new face that's the youngest AD in FBS. And so you go from somebody that's retired on the back end of their career to somebody really young and got a lot of energy, but they've got questions about who you are. They don't know Bryan was this deputy at Washington State and he did X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
They just know Bryan's standing in front of me telling me he wants to go from good to great X, Y, and Z, and they don't really have that relationship. So I think the process of building trust with that staff, our coaches, and everybody else, something maybe I underestimated on the front end, how hard that was going to be to get going, but how much attention I would have to give that to move our organization forward. So we're still in that process right now of meeting everybody, having relationships, and a lot of people put out words. I'm about action.
Yeah.
And so I've got to demonstrate actions, and we've got to go through some things where people can say, hey, all that stuff he was mouthing off at the press conference, all that stuff he was mouthing off at our first staff meeting, he actually means that, and he backs it up with his action. And I think underestimating that on the front end, now knowing that, I know I've got to be really intentional about that process of building those relationships.
You got to break down some hesitation, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that can be tough. It could be an adventure too.
Yeah.
Right? I'll ask you the final question, and then we'll wrap. The relationship with the president, right? You and President Schultz, I believe, at Washington State.
Yeah.
You guys had an excellent relationship from what I saw. And I assume, right, you have, starting off on a good foot, excellent relationship there at Toledo.
Absolutely.
And you want to build that.
Yeah.
You want to continue to grow that. Talk to me about how that can happen from this point forward, because it really is dictated by the president and how much that person allows you to create the relationship, but your expectations for the relationship with the president and how you want to grow that relationship.
Yeah, and I'm incredibly thankful for Kirk Schultz at Washington State. I mean, I think he's one of the best presidents in the country. So he gets athletics, and so for him to mentor me, bring me in, and have regular meetings and talk about all the things that it is to be a president puts me at ease a little bit in terms of meeting with my current president as a first-time AD and having some of these kind of conversations. I think now with Dr. Postal, who's had high-level experience with athletics at Louisville and other stops in between, he gets it. He wants to support me. But still, and then going back to my last comment, it takes time. Yeah. You don't just create trust out of thin air.
Exactly.
You got to go through some things to create trust. You got to have some trials and tribulations. So I think as decisions pop up, as interactions happen, as things we have to accomplish moving forward happen, we start to break down those barriers and build that relationship of trust. But for me, I want somebody that I always keep in the loop, always communicate, and somebody that can give me honest feedback on how I'm doing, what I'm doing, and what they think about what we're doing, because we serve the overall university.
Yeah.
And I hope from his perspective, he's got an AD that, one, I trust him to handle that athletic department and make some really good decisions, but also that he won't surprise me with anything, and he keeps me in the loop on what's going on. So we're developing that cadence. Sometimes it's, or do you meet once a month? Do you meet bi-weekly? Right. Do you meet weekly? Can you pull him aside? Does he like text? Does he prefer phone calls? Does he rather email to his assistant? All those things that you probably hadn't given much thought to as far as communication styles, because my last boss was my AD, and he was literally next door in my office suite, and I could just walk over all the time.
Right.
Probably to the point it bugged him a little bit. I won't quite do that to the president. So it's figuring out, okay, with the cadence that makes sense and respects all the responsibilities he has, at the same time, athletics is visible. I need to keep him in the loop. So we're dancing that dance a little bit and trying to figure it out.
I thought about one more question, if you allow. On some campuses, I don't know if sometimes there are people in faculty or staff on campus that understand that athletics is a part of the academic mission of the university. Of course, the president understands, or you wouldn't report to the president. Well, that's probably not true, but of course the president understands, because they hired you and you want, like you're saying, you want to develop that relationship and that communication. But I wonder about that part of an athletics director's job of making sure the greater academic community understands that athletics is also a part of the academic mission on the university.
Yeah, it's critical.
Right.
Especially at a place like a university at Toledo, where we receive heavy institutional and student fee support. I think for those institutions that are in line with that, you constantly have to understand your value proposition and be able to articulate that and show that and demonstrate that to people and invite people under the curtain to see why you do what you do and understand how amazing your student athletes are.
Yeah.
If you take that for granted and you still getting that heavy support, when people start to say, well, why are we giving that much money, or we need to pull back on budgets, that conversation won't go well, because then you're in a defense mode.
Exactly.
And you're trying to defend yourself. So I like to play offense from that perspective. We're going to get out in front of people and show them why we are valuable. We're going to show them why we matter to the institution, why we honestly matter to the city of Toledo. A lot of places talk about being the front porch of the university. I also want to be the front porch of this city and represent the city. So if you love that place, if you live at that place, you're proud of this university. So we're going to represent them the right way, but also be able to articulate and demonstrate our value on a regular basis. So by the time we need to explain ourselves, most of the people have already heard and understand to the greatest degree they can why we're valuable. And hopefully they're cheerleaders and fans of Toledo athletics much more than they are the naysayers.
Yeah, it's excellent. Well, Bryan, this has been an excellent conversation. I am happy that you were the athletics director, vice president at Toledo, and I really appreciate you joining us here on AthleticDirectorU.
Absolutely. I appreciate your time.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
That was Bryan Blair, vice president of athletics at University of Toledo. And of course, I am Ty Brown with AthleticDirectorU. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today.